Evolutionary.org Hardcore 2.0, episode 113 coming your way. Today we're going to talk about options for moderate bulking, but not bloating from Ultima. So in this one, Mobster and I, we're going to talk about typical bulking versus lean bulk. We're going to talk about manipulating your diet. We're going to talk about keeping your gains. We're going to talk about best Ultima steroid stacks. We're going to talk about using AI properly. And we're going to talk about Ultima quality, why they are so popular. But first, let's start with the first topic, which is typical bulking versus lean bulk, because this is a good one. We just see this in the gym all the time, people walking around who are doing different types of bulks. Everyone has their own style, but maybe, just maybe, there's a better way. So we're going to talk about typical bulking versus lean bulk. Mobster, why don't you start us off with your thoughts on this?
Right, guys. So I've discussed on previous shows the more traditional approach to bulking, specifically in the past, and it's still something that we see when we look at some of the photographs, etc., when people have bulked up on the forums, right? And essentially, the traditional form, Steve, which was even worse, I guess, used to be easily 15, 20 pounds of tissue added. I've seen 30, 40 pounds in the past. And the problem with that was that people have kind of gone crazy with the diet and they put on a lot of body fat at the same time as they put on a decent amount of muscle. Let's use 20 pounds as an example. You might be incredibly lucky if you gain 20 pounds, even in today's day and age, Steve. And I would not be at all surprised, especially back in the day, if the bulk would be 6 or 7 pounds, maybe even more, of fat and water, and maybe 12, 13 pounds, whatever, of muscle tissue. And then the problem became, of course, that you hadn't really got lean to begin with, or you was in a kind of okay shape to begin with. So now you've just made it so that you've got to now lose in order for those muscles to show 6 or 7 pounds of fat. So over time, and I don't think it's as bad as it was back in the day, but it can still be something that people get confused, especially if their diet's poor, which we're going to get into. What we like to see now is that combination of a little bit of fat, 1 or 2 pounds of water, 1 or 2 pounds of fat, Steve. So maybe if you gain 10 pounds, 4 pounds of that is superfluous, but 5 or 6 pounds is muscle tissue. And Steve and I have talked about this on multiple shows. It's a lot easier to diet off a couple of pounds of fat. It's a lot easier to lose a little bit of water and have those muscles come through, have it shine, have the gain shine. And it's a hell of a lot easier, which we will get into again, keeping 5 or 6 pounds. And something that Steve and I have reiterated on multiple shows, especially when Steve and I first started doing these shows, Steve, was how it adds up. We would say, right, so you can do a 20-week cycle, you can take every bloody steroid known to mankind, you can blow the fuck up 20 pounds, and that's absolutely amazing. But trust us, you will not gain 20 pounds every single cycle. You can't have a few weeks off and repeat another 20-week cycle and gain another 20 pounds. It just won't happen. It doesn't work like that. The body doesn't like it. It's a kind of weird situation. Whereas we say, for example, and this really comes down to how long you guys plan on training. Steve and I, between us, have probably done in excess of 60, maybe even close to 70 years of working out between us. I'm up on 45 years, right? And I've gained an enormous amount of tissue, some fat, obviously, as I'm more of a strength athlete than a bodybuilder, over the length of time that I've been training. And we done the math the other day, Steve, and I think it's in excess of 150 pounds right now, talking to this on this show. From where I was when I was 18, although I started when I was 15 till now. And I actually worked out one time before, Steve, that I had actually gained the precise average amount of lean tissue and or fat that most people get. I'm not necessarily, although I'm a big fucking strong motherfucker, arguably my gains have actually, well, there have been a few times when they've been higher, but on average, I've only gained the same as everybody else. Roughly this amount of tissue. You go out 45 years, you get the 150 pounds. I think it's like 4.5 pounds a year, Steve. 4.5 pounds a year does not sound sexy at all. It's not exciting. It's not, oh my God, you could have done 2,000 milligrams of this and a gram of tren. And you gain, no. I've gained on average, I think it works out to something silly like 4.5 pounds per year. But for 45 fucking years, Steve. So over time, it adds up. Now, the majority of our listeners will, of course, be bodybuilders, people that want to be muscular, people that want to be in shape, they want to do modeling gigs, they want to look good for the beach, they want to attract more girls, etc. And even the girls, it'll be a question of getting into shape, losing a little bit of body fat, having your reps pop through, having the certain curves in the right particular places, having that kind of lean, flat belly thing going on. The stuff that we like to see and the stuff that female athletes that train in the gym tend to be looking for. And again, if they do decide to become quote unquote bodybuilders and add a little bit of tissue, you could probably half the numbers, 1 or 2 pounds of tissue, 1 or 2 pounds of muscle, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it would average out at a small amount. But over the years, over the length of time you train, over the number of cycles that you plan on doing, it all fucking adds up. And this is super, super important. And again, I know I'll bring Steve in now briefly because I know that him and I, we don't always agree on everything, but there are certain topics we agree on. I know that this is one that Steve and I are very keen on in terms of those small gains, keepable gains, adding up over time. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, and look, I one time argued with a guy on the forum who claimed that he could put on 20 pounds of muscle per cycle. Muscle, we're talking about muscle. And I told him, I was like, look, I tried to reason with him. I said, look, if that was true, then after 2 cycles, you'd put on 40 pounds. After 5 cycles, you'd put on 100 pounds of muscle. That means you'd be a Mr. Olympia champion. It doesn't make any sense because what happens, all right, to those of you out there who you want a dirty bulk and you want to put on sloppy weight, what ends up happening is you strain your heart health, you strain your organ health. You go from being an energetic person to being one of those fatigued people, like most people in America who are out of shape and just feel fatigued and feel like shit all day. So that's what happens. And what happens is you have two options. You can either stop doing that, or you can end up like so many other bigorexia type people. And bigorexia is a condition where a person, no matter how big they get, they don't feel like they're big enough. So they want to keep getting bigger and bigger. Rich Piana is a perfect example. Boston Lloyd, a lot of these people. So what ends up happening is you're so obsessed with getting bigger, 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 bigger that you end up killing yourself in the process, because that's what's going to happen. When you manipulate your body and you overdo things and you gain too much and you keep trying to gain as much as you can each time, like it's some type of competition, and you can't accept that you're going to gain some on a cycle and you're going to lose some when you come off. That's normal, because what happens is your water weight and your, some of the body fat you put on, will get shaved off. So the scale will go up, but then the scale will go back down when you come off. I mean, the idea is, like Mobster said, you want to gain a steady amount of weight year over year. And I'd say 4 pounds is a lot, Mobster. Really, I would say for most of you, Mobster is his own animal. He's a tall,
Yeah.
British guy. He's got a lot of size on him, a lot of strength. He's a he's an outlier. But for most of you listening to this, it's going to be 1 to 2 pounds of actual muscle tissue per year is what you should be aiming for. Now, that doesn't mean on each cycle you're going to gain half a pound. If you do 2 cycles a year, you're going to gain half a pound a cycle. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying muscle tissue. So I'm saying you may gain 5 pounds, 6 pounds, 7 pounds on a cycle, but at the end of the day, how much muscle tissue of that is actual muscle tissue that's keepable? And we're going to talk about keepable gains and in a future segment on this podcast. But you've got to kind of think about this long term. And this is why I go back to what I said at the beginning, trying to reason with people on this stuff. And I tried to explain to the guy, I'm like, look, you're not going to put 20 pounds of muscle on each cycle. That's not possible, because after 5 cycles, you put on 100 pounds. After 10 cycles, you put on 200 pounds. You'd be the most muscular man in human history. It doesn't make any sense. So that's not how our bodies work. And if you just think about this stuff logically and use science to think about this stuff, this is why I was always encourage you guys to do, because science and math doesn't lie. 2 plus 2 is going to equal 4. You can go on a debate and argue that 2 plus 2 equals 3 and just debate it, all right, all you want, but it's not going to change the facts, and we see this over the years on forums. We see people who just, they're keyboard warriors, they're bullies online, and they basically will use their opinion which is based on fantasy to kind of strong arm others into believing their point of view based because they're good at it. They're snake oil salesmen. They're good at marketing. They're good at that stuff. But at the end of the day, on this podcast, Mobster and I, we built this podcast on science and the facts. So the facts
Yes.
are you're not going to gain 20 pounds of muscle on a cycle. It's impossible. The only way you can gain a lot of muscle on a cycle, there is one way you can do it, is if let's say you went to a Russian, you went to Russia, you did something, or they claim you did something and they threw your ass in jail
Yeah.
and you did
Well, you're in
hard
prison.
labor.
That's it.
You
Yeah,
went
yeah,
from
yeah,
being mobsters size, and mobster had to go to the prison. So mobster
yeah,
had to go to a hard labor camp where they're working the shit out of him,
yeah.
12 hours and 14 hours a day,
That's it.
feeding him very little calories, maybe
Yeah,
400 calories a day. So he would lose a shit ton of
yeah,
muscle if that happened to him. And then when he got out of the prison after 4 years, he would be like 120 pounds less than he is now, maybe even more, maybe 140 pounds less. So, and then he went back on steroids and he went back to
yeah,
eating a lot of calories as he does now. And he went back to doing his regular workouts. Then in that case, he could gain 20 pounds of muscle on a cycle. You see, because it's body memory. So it's the body memory effect. Just like a pitcher in baseball, they can pitch the ball 100 miles an hour, but then they have surgery and now the doctor tells him you can't throw another pitch for 5 months. You have to wait 5 months before you throw another pitch. So then he comes back and he's throwing pitches, 30-mile-an-hour pitches, 40-mile-an-hour pitches. And then, like, after a month, he's back to throwing 80, 90 miles an hour. And after 2 months, he's back to throwing 100 miles an hour after his rehab. So that's an example of body memory kicking in. So those of you out there who are starting out using steroids and you've never used steroids before, you're not going to put on 20 pounds unless it's sloppy weight. Now, I can put any of you on a cycle. This is what I tell my clients who come to me, and some of the skinny guys that come to me, okay? And they're like, Steve, I want to get big. I want to get big ASAP. I'm like, look, I can put you on a cycle that's going to bloat you up, okay, like a dead fish. But I'm
yeah.
telling you, you're not going to like the way you feel. Your blood pressure is going to get
No.
strained. You're going to feel like shit all day. Just imagine carrying around 20 pounds of water on your back 24/7, sleeping with it, walking around with it, going to work with it on your back. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel the fatigue and the energy drain. You're not gonna like it at all. And long term, it's gonna actually backfire you. So I just tell people, look, go into a cycle with a realistic gain and know that there's difference between typical bulking versus a lean bulk. There's a difference.
Yeah,
And there's a difference
yeah.
between dirty bulking. So there are different ways to do it. Go ahead, Monster.
Let me just finish on this particular thought, Steve, and something you mentioned the other day rang true when I was thinking about this. So number one is Steve and I have talked multiple times, and Steve's brought this up on many, many shows, and I've agreed with him again when we talk about the obesity crisis. So I think another reason for lean bulking becoming more popular than the dirty bulking slash old fashioned type of bulking is back in the day, not as many people that were doing this, what we do, what you listeners do, going to the gym, getting into shape, training with weights, getting strong, getting muscular, were as out of shape. The population as a whole is more obese. The population as a whole, I'm not just talking about American, Steve's side of the wall, but my side, Europe, whatever else. The first world population is fatter than it's ever been. And we are seeing this more and more and more, right? So the reality is people are already out of shape. And the idea of dirty bulking, throwing just whatever the fuck kind of tissue at the body when you're already out of shape is a really bad idea. You might as well say, well, I'm going to get 10 pounds of fat and 10 pounds. You're already like 40 pounds overweight with fat. You want to get into shape. Why is adding more fat, more water, more bloat a good idea? It is not. It's unhealthy as fuck. The other side, oh, sorry, there's two more things. So one is, Steve, the idea that someone online can sit down and tell you that maybe 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000 could add 20 pounds. When you're underweight, when you're out of shape and you want to get into shape, that sounds as attractive as hell. To use it, it's traction, it's sexy as fuck. It's great if I want to sell you products. Okay. But the reality is, it is literally going to be one genetic freak. And again, I can go online, Steve can go online, we can search, we can find examples of guys that have added 10, 15, 20 pounds. We talked about it on other shows. I've said someone I knew that was on anadrol, fantastic gains, etc., etc. But that would be the 1 in 1,000, maybe less. The majority of people will gain smaller amounts. The other thing, and I'll touch upon something that Steve just finished on, is, and we've talked about this before, I use the analogy of having a fairy godmother and she waves her magic wand and she magically, even at my size now, Steve, throws 20 pounds at me. But let's say I'm an average Joe. Even at my size, it would be uncomfortable. It would make me, as we do this show, I weighed myself at the gym this morning, 325. You listen to these shows on a regular basis, you will note it's not always the same body weight. It's my body weight this morning. 20 pounds would make me 345, which is 9 pounds more than I've ever weighed. And it's 20 pounds more than I weigh right now. I would fucking hate it. Not because I've suddenly got much bigger arms or a bigger chest or a broader back or whatever. That would be fabulous, as always. Not because I've suddenly got stronger. That would be great. My heart would hate it. My lungs would hate it. And literally, it would be the equivalent of me carrying a bag of shopping round my neck all fucking day. It would be sitting on me, and it would not be a nice place to be. Like I said, if you have been muscular before and you gain back muscle, you're only getting back to where you was before, which should be keepable, which should be something you're comfortable with. But 20 pounds of tissue, specifically lean muscular tissue, would take your body a while to get used to. I've talked about in the past that if I did a cycle for, and which it was me training for the strength competition, specifically the stuff I used to compete in, and I gained 5 or 10 pounds, let's say 10 pounds, Steve, and I kept 5 pounds, it would still take me roughly 3 months. And I would be aware of how this worked because I was working, because I was doing stuff around the house and whatever else. It would take me roughly 3 months, 12 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, not much, maybe 16 at a pinch, to feel completely normal, comfortable, doing all the stuff that I would normally do, maybe decorating, cleaning the house, going to the shops, doing all the shit that you normally do, and feel okay weighing 5 pounds more than I used to. And I'm talking about when I was 270, 280, and become 285, 290, and so on and so forth. So the same thing applies. It doesn't matter where you are. You might be 160 getting to 170. You might be 300 getting to 310. It's still something that requires your body a certain length of time. For example, Steve, we talk about diet. When I say, why don't you talk about lifestyle? Don't talk about diet because diet sounds temporary. Lifestyle nutrition, permanent stuff is making changes for the long term, not the short term. And the idea that you've got 5 pounds or even 10 pounds of new tissue will take your body nutritionally, training, might be clothing, Steve, some things that are tight that you need to go out and buy loose things. It might be stupid shit like for me, weighing the weight that I weigh now, and me suddenly gaining 20 pounds would fuck my bed. It would fuck certain chairs I sit on. It would be just getting, I mean, I struggle to get in and out of normal cars now. Can you imagine how it's like 20 pounds? I don't think I'm getting any of my buddies' cars. I'm just about getting a kind of Jeep. Anything else that's near the ground, I'm not quite down on my hands and knees crawling into a sports car, but I'm not far off it, Steve. You know, the seat's all the way back, it's all the way up, it's all that kind of stuff. So you don't think about these things. We fantasize about the big arms and the bigger chest. And the reality of all this kind of stuff is that the big numbers are incredibly sexy. They work really well if I'm selling PEDs. They work really well if I'm a PT or a coach. They work really well if you come to the gym. But 5 pounds, 6 pounds is a huge amount. And I've talked about it just from the old fashioned books, the 1950s, 1960s books I've got here. 10 pounds is roughly 1 inch all over on your chest, on your arms, on your shoulders. Every measurement you would normally take to show what muscle size you've got is 1 inch all over. So, yeah, 5 pounds, Steve, half an inch, you can get used to it, and you can always do another cycle. Let's move on to the next topic, Steve. Back to you.
Yeah, so pre-show, last night I wrote down some notes on what I would talk about when it comes to manipulating your diet. And let me talk about this for a bit, and I'll bring in Mobster. Now, first of all, there's a couple things that are really dumb out there that I've seen. A lot of people that put this out, they have agendas. They want, shock value and stuff. So what they'll do is they'll talk about dirty bulking, and they'll talk about IFYM. And IFYM stands for if it fits your macro. So I'm going to explain what both of those mean. So dirty bulking, we kind of talked about it on the last segment. Dirty bulking is you go to the buffet
Yeah.
and let's I'm not even gonna mention the restaurant, but like let's say you go to a nasty restaurant in town where it's like $12 for all you can eat buffet. If you go to a restaurant, it's $12 from all you can eat buffet. You know the food is low quality. All right.
Yeah.
So you walk in there and you're getting 3 plates, 4 plates, 5 plates of food. You're eating dessert, you're eating chocolate, you're eating all this stuff. Like you're not touching a fruit or vegetable unless it's like fried or unless the fruit, it's like a strawberry full of chocolate. So that's dirty bulking. That would be an example of dirty bulking. So that's really unhealthy food. Another thing, if it fits your macros, it's sort of like the same thing, but in this case, people have this belief out there, and it is just a belief. It's not based on fact that you can just eat whatever you want as long as it fits the amount of protein and fats and carbs per day, and it fits the amount of carbs you want to get and the amount of calories you can get. It's like basically I can eat pizza, candy bars, candy, processed
Sugar
junk,
cereals, ice cream.
subs, all
Yeah.
this stuff, as long as it fits my. So at the end of the day, if I'm 500 calories short of whatever my goal was, I can go eat 2 slices of pizza at the cheapest pizza place where it's $1 a slice because it's the lowest quality ingredients on earth, and not there's about 100 ingredients just in the cheese and just in the crust.
So
You
long as
know,
you hit your numbers,
as
Steve,
long
your
as you
fat,
hit,
your
yeah,
carbohydrate, your protein. Yeah.
yeah. So here's why. Dirty bulking, look, I mean, do you really have to explain this? We know it isn't healthy and it will strain you. If it fits your macros, it's going to destroy your gut health. You have lining in your stomach, right? It's going to destroy, it's going to cause holes in your lining. All right. So that's going to absolutely destroy your gut. And many of you, unfortunately, genetic backgrounds, you already have these types of things, the Crohn's disease, the IBS, leaky
Yeah.
gut, all this stuff. A lot of you already have it, but what happens is in bodybuilding, bodybuilders develop it over time because of the amount of sheer food they have. And Americans in general will develop it over time because of the poor quality diet. So you're causing your gut health to deteriorate. You're also clogging up your arteries, not just inside your arteries, but also outside your arteries because you're allowing all these polyunsaturated fats to start forming. So what happens when the polyunsaturated fats form on the outside of the arteries? Your body doesn't, because you're eating such a shitty diet, it's building and building and building, and there's nothing to, you're not consuming the good quality foods that have the antioxidants and to kind of attack that, the vitamins and the minerals that you need. So you're not getting those. And what ends up happening is eventually that artery will collapse, and then you'll end up needing to call 911 and get a ambulance to come grab you and take you to the hospital. And hopefully you'll be okay. But then afterwards, it's going to be miserable. What happens? Post heart attack is more miserable than pre heart attack because it's like getting a root canal. You didn't take care of your teeth the whole time. You neglected your teeth, and then you got to get the root canal. Then you got to get a crown. You got to go back to the doctor, the dentist 3, 4 times, waste your time. He's got to give you these injections to numb you. He's got to fit the crown. It's a pain in the ass, and it's expensive. So it would have made more sense just to do the right thing the whole way and take care of yourself, just like your arteries. It makes more sense to take care of your arteries. So when you do that, it's going to mess you up, and also it screws up your mental health. Because what ends up happening is you get addicted to these unhealthy foods, and and then you're gonna want them more and more if you keep doing it. So if it affects your macros, and dirty bulking is bullshit. So we got to stick to. I don't care if you're bulking, cutting, whatever. In a bulking situation, you got to stick to healthy, nutritious foods. You got to. So I'm gonna give you a list. And these are some of the ones I wrote down here. Grass-fed beef, high-quality, humanely raised chicken, turkey, and eggs.
Yeah.
Brown rice, sweet potatoes, fruits, green vegetables, bone broth, and organ meat. So
Yeah.
if you want something sweet, you got to go after that fruit. Have some pineapple after your meal if you want something sweet. Or what you can do is you can make your own coconut flour pancakes. I do this all the time. You use raw honey on top, and then, or you can make oatmeal cookies, which I also do. And the oatmeal cookies are made from eggs, raisins, honey, and oats. So it's really, really good. And like you wouldn't even know that these were any different than going to any breakfast restaurant and ordering pancakes. The pancakes they have at the breakfast restaurant are low quality. They're full of refined
Come out
flour.
of a sack. They come out of a
Yeah.
sack, Steve.
And the
So they get a
maple
sack.
syrup that they give you is like all sugar. It's all sugar.
Mm,
It's not even real
mm,
syrup. It's sugar. So
no.
look, at the end of the day, you've got to make the right decisions on what you put in your body. And, you have to do the right thing because long term and short term, it's going to make all the difference. So manipulating your diet is the number one thing. You're going to feel good on this diet. You're going to be able to bulk on this diet. You're going to be able to it's not going to interfere with your workouts because when you go work out, you're not going to have the cramping in your stomach and feeling heavy and feeling like shit. So you're going to be able to go to the gym and kick ass in the gym. So that's very, very important when it comes to bulking
Yeah.
properly. It's
Let me
not just
jump in there,
about
Steve.
it's not just about, yeah, let me throw as much junk food as I can on my
No,
body
no
and try to
way.
bulk up. Yeah. Go ahead.
Listen, guys, if you go onto the forums, I'm going to mention the logs here, Steve, and you and I have actually said this when we've been talking about the logs specifically, and you say who has the greatest success on the forums with their logs, and it's the guys, and whether it's gaining muscle, losing fat, whatever, right? It is the ones that when you look, they've got pictures of every meal. Now, to me, I don't want to take a picture of my dinner. I don't want to take a picture of my breakfast. That's me. But the guys that have the greatest success do. And they do that because it keeps them straight. It keeps them honest. It keeps them focused on the end game. So they'll put up photographs of amazing fucking breakfast they produce with oatmeal and fruit and goat's milk and whatever, Stephen. And they'll put some fucking homemade taco thing that they made themselves. Or you'll see photographs of meal prep. One of the guys that's sponsored by one of our approved sources, you'll see him cutting up big chunks of this, like one's horse meat, another one was something else this morning, Steve. And the guy is in fucking shape all the time. So that's number one. Number two, and this is what we talk about manipulating the diet. And I've actually got a tip spread on the forum you can come and check out. So I said, what happens with a lot of people, and I suspect a few of our listeners, Steve, is that when it comes to being on cycle, their diet is fucking amazing. The protein's like 300 grams. They've got nothing but healthy fats, etc., etc. And they do really well, like I've just said, with the training logs. The problem is that's only on cycle. And you'll see this a lot. I gained 6 pounds on cycle. It's been a couple of months now. I'm back to where it was. When you look at it, what happened was someone laid out a great diet plan for them. Maybe they come on the forum, we give them some help. They blew up by that 6 pounds. And the moment the cycle was over, they went back to doing what they did before. You need to make a small change. There's a little bit of excess to get you up to the 6, 7, 8 pounds, whatever. And then there's an adaptation from what you were doing before the cycle. And let's use this as an example, Steve. Let's say that Joe weighs 200 pounds. And on the cycle, he gains a magnificent total of 10 pounds. He comes off cycle, 4 pounds is water and fat. That's gone. That's 6 pounds left on the table. Great. What he should be doing is eating macros, protein, fat, carbohydrates of healthy organic food, like we just said, for the 206 pounds. What often happens is he goes back to eating the same kind of numbers, calories, proteins, carbs, fat, macros, whatever, as he did before, which is when he weighed 200 pounds. The other thing he does as well, Steve, and I get this a little bit, is on cycle, he got stronger. He either upped his volume, or he upped the weights he was lifting, or he just became that much more focused in the gym. And what he needs to do is adapt to, again, the stimulus, the volume, the weights, the way that he trains in the gym, that keeps that 6 pounds on him. You cannot go back both with the diet and the training to doing what kept you at 200 pounds. It will not keep you at 206 pounds. You're giving your body no reason for it to hold on to that tissue. Your body is incredibly adaptive, and it's adapted for so that you gain 10 pounds. You kept, hopefully, straight after the cycle, a little bit of fat, a little bit of water dropped off, 6 pounds. But what reason are you giving your body to keep that tissue? So the trick here is not necessarily taking the right PEDs or eating incredibly well or training incredibly well on cycle. It is adapting to the new gains, or if you're trying to get into shape, the new losses. You can't, for example, Steve, if you're overweight by 10 pounds and you're eating 4,000 calories a day and doing no exercise, get into amazing shape on cycle, cut down to 2,000 calories, do fasting, have the world's best diet, etc., and then go back to eating 4,000 calories a day and back to not working out and back to not doing cardio and back to not fasting and expect your body to be where it was just after the cycle when you looked amazing. Obviously, you're going to go back. It makes zero sense. The bottom line here, and we're going to get into to our choice of lean, bulking, keepable steroids and ancillaries momentarily, is work hard both in the kitchen and in the gym. And keep in mind that you want keepable gains. And keepable gains comes with an additional little bit more stimulus than it used to before. And that might mean a little bit more cardio, a little bit more training, a little bit heavier weights, whatever. Or if you're getting into shape and you drop fat, you need to have those activity levels maintain the loss. If you're losing weight, if you're getting leaner, or the gain, if it was gaining weight, being stronger, etc. It needs to be that way about. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be like twice the volume or 3 times the weights or 1/3 the calories. It doesn't have to be like that, but it does need to be something for you to have a permanent adaptation in your body. It might be, for example, Steve, a flatter stomach. You need to be doing exactly what we did on cycle that kept you with a flatter stomach. And that might be, for example, smaller, more frequent meals to stop your stomach sticking out. It might be that you were doing 4,000 steps a day and you lost weight by doing 6,000 steps, or maybe you need to do 5,000 steps post cycle, and so on. So keep that in mind. So let's talk now, Steve, about our choice of Ultima products that we would use, which are going to give you keepable gains. And of course, as we say, ancillaries, because we want to minimize the bloating that some people get on cycle as well. I'll start with yourself.
Yeah, so keepable gains are important. And if you take your time and you gain slow weight, it's obviously going to be easier to keep it. And that's because our bodies build up the memory over time. So if your body, if you're used, let's say you're 200 pounds, you've been 200 pounds for the past 5 years, and then you use a steroid cycle and you blow up 20 pounds. It's going to be harder for you to keep that 20 pounds because your body's used to being 200 pounds. So when you come off the steroids, it's going to want to revert back to 200 pounds. So it makes more sense to gain good quality, keepable muscle tissue of a few pounds each cycle and focus on that. And don't focus so much as I want to move the scale up. I know it's tempting because I used to be one of those skinny guys. I know it's tempting and you want to get bigger, you want to get wider, and you want to do it quickly. But what happens is in the process, as I said in the last segment, you'll end up just hurting your health and you're hurting yourself long term anyway. So you might as well just do it right from the start and be disciplined and put on good quality weight. When you see someone who does a transformation and you see their before and after, and you see them really at the end of the day, they only change their body weight like 2 or 3 pounds. But you look at the two pictures, and the second picture, they look way more muscular and they look way more leaner than they did on the previous picture because they were able to put on muscle and lose fat at the same time. So even if their weight, their body weight, when they step on the scale, barely moved, they look so much better. So when in a bodybuilding aspect, isn't that better when it comes to you want a moderate bulk? Wouldn't it make more sense to do it that way and just look better each cycle? You want to look better. You want to look more muscular, lose body fat, more muscular, lose body fat. So you're still bulking, but the difference is you have less body fat on your frame. So if you started at 15% body fat, and then you got down to 14%, then 13%, then 12, and you kept dropping your body fat each cycle, and you were putting on muscle at the same time, you'll look like $1,000,000 after 5 years or 10 years. You should look like $1,000,000 when you're in front of the mirror. That's the idea behind keepable gains, and those gains are keepable versus the person who was impatient and said, fuck it, I'm going to put on 20, 25 pounds on my cycle and just try to move the scale as much as I can. How do they look a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now? So part of keepable gains, Mobster, is worrying more about year over year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc., versus 12-week cycle, 10-week cycle. I want to completely transform myself. That's the way I look at this topic. How about you?
I talked to a buddy this morning, Steve, when we were discussing for some reason a 20-week cycle. And I said, look, one of the issues that sometimes happens with our younger listeners and those that are new to the game is that we tend to be in a hurry and we tend not to be that forward thinking. And this is perfectly normal when you're young. I joked with him, Steve, that when we were young, if we was out drinking together, if I was his age, I don't think I'd be thinking much beyond the Saturday night. Never mind the Sunday morning or the Monday morning. Whereas now I'm an old motherfucker, I start to think like with insurance and pensions and shit. I like to look down the road. And so one of the things that I occasionally try to tell people on the forums when it comes to this is think long term. Yeah, your body transformation. For example, let's say that you are overweight and you want to get in shape. And Steve and I did a show on this the other day where I think we said something like it's taken you 5 or 10 years, maybe, to get out of shape. In school, you was active, you were running around, you was busy all the time, you stayed kind of in shape. And then once you started working your career for whatever, sitting in an office, highly qualified, you've done well at college, university, so on and so forth. You've been doing this job for 5, 6, 7 years. And over time, because you've been doing a desk job, you've got out of shape. It's taken you 5 or 6 years to get to be fat, to the point where you go, do you know what? Fuck it, I want to make a change. You will not transform your physique that has taken you 5 or 6 years to get out of shape with in a matter of weeks, in a matter of months. It might take a year. And then you say, I like the shape that I've got. It's taken me a year, but my shape's amazing. Well, now, are you going to stop? Are you suddenly going to be okay with being fat? Do you think that what you've got there is perfect or whatever else? Just maintaining that takes a lifetime. Certain particular habits when it comes to diet and training should be thought of as long term. I touched on it earlier on when I said, don't call it a diet, call it a lifestyle. Don't say that you're, even when we talk about cycles, Steve, it's easy because we're discussing a fraction of the year for the amount of time that we think we should stay on PEDs. And I even have training cycles. You could argue these are macro cycles. But the reality of the situation is I'm training all year round. I might have times of the year when I'm training heavy, times of the year when I do more volume, times of the year when I change the exercises just for a fucking break. And then times of the year when I go back on the heavy stuff and I have a particular focus or a number that I want to hit. But I'm talking about, again, in my case, fucking decades. And guys, who doesn't want to be in shape forever? Who doesn't want to be lean or muscular or strong or whatever it is that you decide to come to this show for? But specifically today, lean muscular gains with as little bloat as possible for as long as possible. That requires long-term thinking. So what you might be talking about in the short term is a cycle, which we're going to discuss. It might even mean that you have to change what you're doing in the gym for a more longer-term point of view in terms of your calorific output, in terms of your cardio. It certainly might require a long-term point of view in terms of your diet to maintain the gains afterwards and so on and so forth. But it's not something you should be thinking about in terms of a few months. Certainly, it needs to be a longer-term thing. And then again, the ultimate thing, the dream, Steve, would be also, if we could wave a magic wand, it would be get into shape, be amazing, have a six-pack, and then never have to go to the gym again. But the reality is, of course, that we do. Hopefully the listener, and a typical listener of this show, is someone that's been doing it for a while. They are serious about their shit, and they realize this is not a 5-minute thing. You're not in this for shits and giggles. You're not in this for 16 or 20 weeks. You're in it for the long term. You've been training for a few years already, the majority of you, and you are going to train for a few years just yet. It's going to take a big lifestyle change, marriage and kids and whatever else, to take you out of the gym. And we see this quite often, Steve. We got guys that come onto the forum that trained 10 years ago and then life got in the way. Hell, who knows? They might have been to prison. But now you're back out and you realize you liked how you felt. So that's what we're about here, guys. You've all got your different things, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show. But we want you to be successful, and you need to have something of a long-term view in terms of your greatest likelihood of being successful. And we're going to give you tips and give you examples, hopefully of what we've spoken about already. And of course, when we start to talk about PEDs, as we will shortly. What about your choice, Steve, of, for example, Ultima orals? What would be your choice for the first oral steroid today for keepable gains?
Yeah, so let's talk about the steroids. And look, Ultimo has amazing options for moderate bulking. And we're gonna go over some of our favorites. So we're gonna we'll save the orals toward the end, Mob. So let's start with testosterone because testosterone is great for bulking for many reasons. The main reason why is because when you use testosterone, it gives you both androgenic and anabolic properties, and it increases your appetite in most of you. I would say if you're running testosterone and you don't get an appetite increase, that might be a red flag that something might be wrong with you. You might have strained organs or something because you should get a nice boost in appetite, especially if you've not on TRT previously. So testosterone and Ultima has so many options of testosterone, Mobster. They have short esters, they have long esters, they have blends. So any dose anywhere from 100 if you want to go a TRT route, and run it that way, or up to 750 milligrams a week for 8 to 14 weeks, depending on what ester you choose, would be a good option. And you can use testosterone solo at around 400 to 500 milligrams a week, or you can use it as part of a stack. A lot of guys, they like to use it as a base of their cycle, or a lot of guys like to use a TRT dose just to keep a base on their cycle, and then they'll run some other things that we're going to talk about in these options. But talk about a little bit about testosterone, Mob. So I don't know if you want to talk about some of their options that you like, including their sustanon.
Yeah, Steve. I mean, look, Sustanon is one of my favorites for bulking, but I would probably, and it might be actually be specifically my own personal experience, Steve, because I've talked multiple times before on different shows when I say that Sust and Decker together is my favorite bulking stack of all time. However, the way that I trained and the way that I've eaten, because I've not been trying to keep lean, keepable gains, I've blown the fuck up. Right. So, and I haven't used silly amounts, but if I'd have been, I think if I'd have been tighter with my diet, and especially if I'd have tried to adapt my diet for the post cycle, keepable gains, I might have seen more progress in that particular area. But the reality was, I wanted to get as big as a fucking house because the leverage for me is better for strength. And therefore, what I was doing in the gym made me maximal strong and maximal size. Okay, so as an example, it's very simple Sustecker cycle. I would go from 280 to 300 pounds, and my strength would go up between 5 and 10%. 300 pounds, 20-pound gain, as I said earlier, was uncomfortable because it fucking was. I'd probably be gaining that kind of weight. You're looking at about 6 to 8 weeks. And I wasn't running much more than around 700 milligrams total, roughly 350 milligrams, there or thereabouts of each per week. And that would be over 2 injections. So that worked for me, but I wasn't trying to gain that weight. I might gain 2 or 3, maybe 4 pounds of muscle out of that. But again, I wasn't trying to keep. Now, if I was a bodybuilder and I was more focused on keep, and I would certainly do more cardio, which I wasn't doing much of back in the day. Again, my fitness wasn't an issue, and it certainly wasn't a part of what I was training for. So I would have upped my cardio, done a lot more steps on a daily basis, more rowing, more kettlebell work, Steve, more battle rope type stuff. And I would have definitely been way more tighter on my diet. The only thing I did like, Steve and I talked about this with the Sustan Decker against Steve, was appetite boost was crazy. I think both Steve and I have talked about, and I've certainly mentioned the idea that I'd be eating my third meal of the day and I'd be dreaming, thinking about the next meal before I went to bed. You should normally be doing something where you are satiating your hunger. I'm putting food into my mouth, it will go into my belly, I will feel full. Therefore, I won't be hungry while I'm eating. But the Sustan Decker cycle made me hungry for food that I haven't even had yet. So that was absolutely fucking crazy. The few of you that are seriously underweight and want to gain weight, that would be an absolutely attractive thing. But again, lean, capable gains with minimal bloat. I would argue in that set of circumstances, Steve, I would probably be looking at the Decker specifically or an MPP. Ultimate does both, of course. And I'd be looking for, I might push the combined totals of those, perhaps with a testosterone, like Steve said, 600 milligrams. Maybe the upper levels for one or two of your listeners will be 800 milligrams, much more than that. And I'll talk about combined totals here. Again, 1 to 2 injections per week. One or two of you might go a little bit more crazy than that. But once we get into the gram and a half, 1.2 grams, whatever plus, you're pushing that towards the end of the side effects issues. And again, too much bloat and so on and so forth. And so you will, and again, for that particular thing, Steve, I was always using an AI, and we'll touch upon on Celia shortly, to make sure that I wasn't gaining too much. I didn't want to, I know I was relatively lean then, say, for example, compared to now. And I want to make sure that the typical listener is getting the most out of this. So you're almost certainly looking to use an AI. And again, amounts. My personal preference was not for testosterone enanthate, but my buddies absolutely loved it. So something like testosterone enanthate, Steve, circa 400 milligrams a week. And then maybe, again, this is probably someone that's done a couple of cycles already, the same amount again of the Deca. So what about a choice for yourself, Steve, on the next one?
Yeah, and let me just add with the DECA, if you want to go the shorter route, shorter ester route, you can go with the NPP, and they have that as well. So nanoyl phenylpropionate. So if you want to use DECA, you're going to have to go 10 to 12 weeks at least. But with the NPP, you can keep it at 8 weeks or 10 weeks, no problem. So you can don't give up on DECA just because it's a long ester and you're worried about recovery.
Yeah,
This
sorry on
one.
that, Steve.
Mhm.
I agree with Steve completely. And the one and only time, and I think I've mentioned this on the forums, that I ever went the 16 weeks was literally because I was doing one competition 8 weeks in and another competition 8 weeks later. So that's the only reason I stayed on. Otherwise, 8 to 12 weeks is perfect for me as well, Steve. Back to you.
Yeah, and the next one I want to talk about is going to be the Ultima Equipoise. And Equipoise is a great moderate bulker. It doesn't aromatize very much. You typically aren't going to need an AI with it. I'll say you won't need an AI with it if you run it correctly. And look, it's still a testosterone derivative that doesn't require an AI. So you're still going to get some of the effects that you would on testosterone, but you're going to get way less of the side effects, way less of the estrogenic side effects, way less of the androgenic side effects. So really, dose anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams a week is more than enough for 12 weeks. And you'll really enjoy equipoise because you're going to be able to, just focus on your training, focus on your diet. You're still going to be able to do cardio, which is important for your heart health. And it's a really, really good option. You can stack in a little testosterone with it, just a little bit, give it a little kick.
They've got two products here, Steve, that I'm looking at while you're talking, which has already done the work for you guys. There's an Ultima Test EQ 200 and I'm Ultima Test EQ 400. And I'd actually pick the 400 and just, minimize the amount that I'm injecting. It's also slightly better money in terms of value for money. But again, guys, you can choose to go whichever way you want. But again, Ultima's done the work for you here. They've got a testing outfit combined with the EQ in both products, so that you literally can buy one product and it's already set up and sorted out. And again, look, for example, guys, you could do the 200, 2 mil a week, that will take you to 400, two times a week, which will take you to 800, or you can do the mix and you can literally divide those up in fractionals of a mil and a half, 2 mils, and so on and so forth, just to work out the numbers here. But for example, I could do a mil and a half, that would be 3/4 of a mil twice a week, and you're looking at 600 milligrams. 2 mil, which again would be the higher end of what I mentioned in the last comment, would be 800 milligrams total, 400 milligrams of each. So the work's been done for you. The ratios have already been worked out for you. And again, it's exactly the sort of stuff that we talked about when we talked about previous companies and products, where a company like Ultima asks you what's a cycle, what is the aim of your cycle, what are the dosages you're going to do, and then they produce the product that exactly matches that. This is perfect for a lean gain, capable gains, low bloat kind of stack, Steve, because the work's already been done for you in this particular product.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of the auras, Mobster. And Ultima Anadrol is a good one because it's a fast bulker and you can run it 50 milligrams for 4 to 5 weeks. So if you're looking for something just to do a quick cycle, it's a really good option. Anadrol is very interesting because it is a DHT derivative, so it doesn't aromatize into estrogen, but it can bind to estrogen receptors. So keep that in mind in the body. And Ultima Anavar, I'll touch on this a little bit, and Mobster, you can talk about it. And Anavar, the misconception behind Anavar is you can only cut on Anavar, you can only recomp on Anavar. But Anavar, you can actually do a good moderate bulking stack on Anavar. And one of the secrets to doing it is actually stacking it. And I'm going to talk about Tren as well on as the final one because Tren is a really good one to stack with Anavar for moderate bulking. I was able to put
Yeah.
on a solid amount of size doing Tren and Anavar. So the nice thing about Tren is Ultima does have many different trend options. So they have the trend Ace, they have the trend E, they have the tri-trend, they have trend mixes and blends. So whatever type of trend situation you want works really good. But just keep in mind with trend, you never want to run too much because of the side effects, and you want to give it at least 4 or 5 cycles before you use trend. But with trend, anywhere from 200 up to 400 milligrams. I like 250, 300 personally. And I
Yes,
think
yes.
even 300 is a little high. I like less is better with trend. It has a lot of side effects, but man, you eat the foods that I talked about earlier on trend and you stack some Anavar with it. That is an that is a awesome cycle for moderate bulking. Very, very good cycle. Mobster?
As regular listeners will know, I'm a big, big fan of Anavar, and I think I'm probably about as maxed out in terms of size, body weight, strength, etc. But even again, when I've talked about training for competitions, I talked about the Sustain Decker earlier on. My alternative to those cycles, and because I might compete more than once a year, although typically it was on average once a year. Um, Anavar was my other choice. Anavar was my other cycle, and I always sort of seem to. I did when body weight might be an issue. Anavar was my go-to oral for that particular reason. If I wanted to get big, Dynabol. If I wanted that sort of lovely pump, Dynabol. But if I wanted here, and this is what used to happen with me. And again, guys, I wasn't trying to get bigger. I was only trying to get stronger. And yet I would average an on-cycle gain of 5 pounds. 5 pounds is fucking fantastic. We said this at the beginning of the show. I'm looking at their two options here, Steve, right in front of me, the 10 milligram and the 50 milligram. 50 milligrams, perfect. I'd probably have half a pill in the morning, half a pill of a night time. 8 weeks for me, anywhere between 4 or 8 weeks seems to work for 99.9% of our listeners. And I was gaining, again, capable gains because 5 pounds is not a massive amount. I'm relatively tall. So I go from 280 to 285 back in the day. Again, I wasn't trying to keep those gains, but I wouldn't have taken any effort whatsoever for me to change my diet a little bit, Steve, or my training a little bit, just to make sure that those gains were capable. And 5 pounds is fantastic, barely noticeable. It's less than half an inch all over on my body. It's certainly not as rough at going up and downstairs and doing the other work that the Stats and Decker cycle used to be on me. And again, Steve, it would take almost no effort on my part to keep these gains. On the average individual, typical listener to this show, 5 pounds is fan fucking tastic. And again, way more capable. The only issue, and I mean the only issue, in terms of any particular problems that I've ever read on an VAR, is the notorious VAR pumps. And you can negate that somewhat with taurine and products that we've discussed on other shows which contain taurine to minimize the pump. Obviously, staying well hydrated helps as well. I'm thinking on your Anavar and trend cycle, Steve, I might look at perhaps T-Bow in there as well, just for your fitness, and also because we know it negates some of the trend side effects that are typical to trend. But yeah, I've used trend in other products, in cut mixes, etc., and recomposition city, baby. I'm not a big trend user. I've only ever used it once. I would not ever want to run it at high dosages. Similar to Steve, 200, 300 milligrams. I think it was actually slightly less because I was averaging with the two other products in the cut products, 150 milligrams of trend per week. The other two came to 450 milligrams total over the week, which is not high, and yet I still recomped, as we've talked about on other shows. So yeah, and then massive, massive food practitioner. I will say, although people can be a little bit lazy when they're using trend and still get good results, as we said on other shows, if you're not lazy and you are on point when you come to the diet, then the trend results will be that much fucking better, Steve. So keep that in mind. What about just as an example here, Steve? I'm looking down the list here. Anadrol. I know for some people it can be a bulker, but what about it's for a lean bulk, minimizing bloat? How would you run Anadrol? And then I'll jump in when you're done.
Yeah, so 25 to 50 milligrams a day for Anadrol. Just keep in mind, it's because it's a DHT derivative, as I mentioned before, you're going to get a nice hardening bulk effect. So it's not going to be like a wet effect like Dianabol. So that's why we didn't discuss Dianabol on this segment. Because with Dianabol, you get a very wet, fluffy look. With Anadrol, you get a bulk, but it's more of a hardening look because it is a DHT derivative. So it's very, very interesting. So if you're looking for something, as I said earlier, you're looking for something that does a quick 4 or 5 week cycle that you want to do, and you want to do some moderate bulking. Anadrol could be right up your alley on that one. Although it can kind of hurt your appetite a little bit because of the strain it's putting on your body. So keep that in mind. All right, so we have a few minutes left, Mobster. Why don't we talk about Ultima a little bit? We don't talk much about Ultima. We haven't done many shows on Ultima. And Ultima's
No.
been around a long time. Some of the biggest steroid sources out there are now carrying Ultima products. And I've used Ultima products a lot. What I really like about Ultima is they have a lot of good promotions. They have a lot of good sales. The more you buy of their product, the more you save in a lot of cases. So I really like that about them. Because they produce so much in bulk, they're able to pass the savings on to you. Another thing I like about their products is the versatility. They have so many different options. If you go take a look at the different Ultima options, they have so many options, no matter what steroid. All these steroids we talked about, they have different options to suit your needs. And I like that a lot. And they also have really good shipping, they have good customer service. So there's really a lot about Ultima to like. And they're definitely one of our favorite brands out there for good reason. And when you order from them, you're getting quality. You can get their testosterone, go get blood work done while you're on the testosterone and see that you're getting good results using their testosterone. So I have a lot of respect for Ultima. Mobster?
I'm looking at the options, Steve, here, and one of the things that we're starting to see, and Ultima's definitely got this already. I mentioned one before, which is the simple fact that they've seen what customers are doing, they've noted what customers have brought, they've got an idea of what a typical customer stack can consist of, and then they produce products that they put together like that. And I like that. I like another thing, Stephen. This is just looking at their injectable section. I've got it on the screen in front of me as we're running this show. One of the things I've said on previous shows when we're discussing sources that we like is where they make the product look medical like. What do I mean by that? Pharmacological companies, big pharma, as we like to call them, producing products, and they tend towards a medical like. So you would see this in the chemist, you would see this in the pharmacies, and there's a sort of generic look about them that makes you trust the product, makes you look at the product in a certain particular way. I have seen, for example, Steve, a few UGLs produce stuff that looks like it was produced in a candy factory. They've gone for crazy colors to catch the eye, etc., etc. And unfortunately, that's great if you're selling candy. It's not so great if you're selling steroids. So the company that goes out and makes an effort to make their product look like what it should be, i.e., pharma quality, produces products, for example, Steve, and we've discussed high milligrams per milliliter type products being an issue back in the day, but pretty much every approved source, including Ultima, again, producing couplers. I'm looking at one here, Steve, Ultima Deca 500. Why is that a big? Because it used to be a pain, literally a pain. Post-injection pain with the high dosage milligrams products per milliliter used to be literally physical pain. You ended up having a dilute product.
Yeah.
Now, pretty much, yeah, go on.
Yeah, and one more thing too, you got to use an AI. I mentioned AI a couple times earlier.
Yes,
Ultima
yes.
provides you with all the on-cycle and off-cycle ancillaries that you need. So
Super important,
they've
guys.
got the Aromacin, the Arimidex, the Novadex, the Letrozole. All these are important. You want to make sure you balance your estrogen. You don't want it too low or too high. So a lot of people want to know how to balance estrogen. At the end of the day, it takes experience and trial and error to really balance your estrogen correctly by trying these different steroids and using the AIs. So at the end of the day, blood work, blood work, blood work. Get blood work done on your cycle 4 or 5 weeks into it, see where your estrogen is. If your estrogen
Yeah.
is too high, you need to increase your AI. If your estrogen is too low, you need to decrease your AI. And then you go from there. And over time, you'll learn how your body works. Your body does change over time, but you will get a good read on how to do estrogen. So Ultima, like I said, that's one of the things I love about Ultima Mobsters. They have it all. They have everything. It's not just steroids. They have
Absolutely.
all your ancillaries on and off cycle to get you covered. Yep.
Yeah, definitely, guys. If you go into the cycle in shape, you're going to get better results. Go into the cycle out of shape and get in shape as you go along. It's going to make it a little bit harder. It's going to be that much more difficult to deal with bloat. Then again, as Steve said, and we actually have this as a subject, to make sure that your ancillaries, specifically your AIs, are on point. Come onto the forum and double check on the numbers. Do I need to bring it down the dose? Do I need to up the dose? Am I taking the dose too frequently? Am I not taking it frequently enough? And we'll help you with that stuff. And even post up photographs of where you are on cycle so that we can see, yeah, you're holding a little bit of water. And this subject is about lean gains and minimizing bloat. So it's important. Don't forget, for example, guys, simple trick. Drinking more water will flush out some of the excess water from your system. And there's that difference between are you getting fatter or are you just being more bloated with more water retention and what you can do about that. So that's super, super important. Listen, guys, let us know what your thoughts are on Ultima. What have you done for lean gains? What works best for you? Have we discussed something that you liked and you thought more about? Is there something you disagreed with? We want to hear your comments. Come onto the forums and check out the logs, like we said already, see where people be successful. And again, long-term, keepable gains, minimizing bloat, working with Ultima has got to be the way to go, guys. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions. Ours is our view and based on our experience of views on the topic, and podcasts for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.